the moment my stepmother, Cynthia, stood up. The air in the opulent boardroom of the Sterling Art Foundation turned to ice. Richard, my father's longtime senior curator and the executor of his will, paused, his hand hovering over the formal documents. Richard, Cynthia said, her voice a perfect performance of practiced sorrow. Before you begin, I'm afraid there's a more recent document. She slid a single, handwritten letter across the vast mahogany table. Her personal lawyer, David, straightened his tie, looking impossibly smug. It's from Michael, she said, her voice breaking just enough to sound authentic. His final declaration. He wrote this just before he passed. I watched her, my heart hammering a cold rhythm against my ribs. Vivian, his 32-year-old daughter, the failed art historian, just waiting for the final erasure. Cynthia took a steadying breath. Addressing the room, he states that due to her history, he declares his daughter, Vivian, mentally unstable and incompetent to inherit. The words hung in the air, heavy and toxic. He grants me, she finished, placing a hand on her chest, full and sole control of the Sterling Foundation and the entire $100 million estate. They all looked at me. Cynthia, her sister Susan, their lawyer. They were expecting me to shatter, to scream, to cry, to prove her diagnosis correct. I didn't. I just looked at Richard. Richard, 62 years old, and a man who had worked with my father for 40 years. Didn't flinch. He didn't look angry. He didn't even look surprised. He simply pushed his glasses up his nose, glanced at the letter she'd presented, and then turned to his laptop. He clicked the mouse. Thank you, Cynthia, he said, his voice calm, almost clinical. By presenting that letter before the official reading of the will, you have just triggered the Contingency Protocol C. S. Cynthia's smile froze. The... What? David, our lawyer, leaned forward, his arrogance vanishing. What protocol? Richard ignored him. His gaze locked on Cynthia. The trap had just been sprung, and she was the one who had just walked right into it. My mind didn't just flash back. It lived 12 years of systematic, cold-blooded erasure. Before Cynthia, my father, Michael, was my entire world. The Sterling Art Foundation wasn't just his business. It was our home, our playground. He taught me how to see, not just look, how to find the story, the brushstroke, the soul hidden beneath the paint. Then, my mother died, and 18 months later, Cynthia arrived. She wasn't some vapid gold digger. She was worse. She was a competitor, a rival Boston gallery owner who saw my father's grief as a corporate merger opportunity. And she didn't just want his money. She wanted his position. She wanted his legacy. And to have it, she needed to get rid of me. The last living piece of his first life. It started so slowly. I didn't even see the knife. Vivian is just so emotional about the art. Michael. I'd overhear her saying, her voice dripping with concern. She doesn't see the business. It's not practical. I was 9 when she accidentally donated my mother's favorite armchair. I was 14 when she convinced Dad that my mother's art studio would make a much better home gym. The gaslighting was a masterpiece of its own. Are you sure your father got the invitation to your recital? Honey, I left it right on his desk. He never showed. I don't know why he's not answering. You must have just missed him. The calls never went through. The real campaign began when I went to college. I wanted to follow in his footsteps. I wanted to be a curator. A. Ph.D. In London, Cynthia had laughed, as if I'd suggested joining the circus. Michael? Darling, isn't that just an escape from reality? It's not a serious career. She's running away because she's unstable. Just like. She never had to finish the sentence. Just like her mother. She planted the seed. She watered it for a decade. She convinced him I was fragile. Impractical. Brilliant, but broken. A liability. Not an heir. And the worst part? The truly insidious part? I started to believe her. I stayed in London, burying myself in my research. I built a reputation, published papers, became a name in the niche world of Renaissance art history. But to my family, I was just the failed academic, the daughter who couldn't handle the real world. I'd call home, excited about a discovery, and Cynthia would answer, "Oh, that's nice. Dear, your father is in a very important board meeting. He'll have to call you back." He never did. For 12 years, she had painted me as incompetent. And now, sitting in that boardroom, holding a letter that was her final brushstroke, I saw the truth. This wasn't just an inheritance battle. It was the completion of her masterpiece, the total erasure of Vivian Sterling. Back in the boardroom, Cynthia let out a sharp, theatrical laugh. The mask of grief was gone, replaced by the triumphant smirk I'd known for 12 years. "A protocol," she scoffed, looking at her lawyer. "David, Richard, this is a farce. You're an employee? I am Michael's widow. That letter," she tapped her fingernail on the forgery, "is his final word. He finally realized his daughter was a liability." She turned her gaze to me, and the air crackled with her venom. She was an apex predator that had finally cornered her prey. "Vivian." "Darling," she cooed, her voice dripping with a sickly, false sympathy. "Don't you worry about a thing. My sister, Susan." She gestured to the woman sitting beside her, who gave me a tight, cold smile. "She knows of an excellent facility outside the city. Very quiet. Very private." I felt my blood turn to ice. It wasn't just a threat to disinherit me. It was a threat to disappear me, to lock me away and prove her lie of my instability to the world. She wasn't just stealing my father's legacy. She was planning to steal my freedom. This was the moment I was supposed to break, to scream, to give her the ammunition she needed. But Richard stood up. He didn't look at her. He didn't respond to her threat. He simply walked past her, as if she were a piece of furniture, and stood beside my chair. He was ignoring her so completely, it was a power move in itself. "Vivian," he said, his voice low and steady. "Your father left very specific instructions for me. He said when this exact moment arrived, you would know what to do." He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a small, sealed envelope. Not a legal document, but a simple, cream-colored card envelope. My name was written on it, not in my father's shaky, ill handwriting, but in his strong, bold script from years ago. Cynthia stopped talking. David looked confused. My fingers trembled slightly as I took it. I broke the wax seal. Inside, there were no letters. No instructions. Just 5 heavy stock note cards. On each card was a string of what looked like nonsense. Short phrases, catalog numbers, and page references. Page 42. Plate 8. B. The Lippi Adoration. Catalog 117A. Sfumato's Failure. Page 201. Section 3. The Duke's Left Hand. Cynthia's lawyer. David stood up. "What is this? More games. We have a legally binding." "It's a code," I said, my voice quiet but clear. The fog of doubt that had clouded my mind for 12 years suddenly evaporated. Cynthia stared at me. "What?" I looked at the cards, and for the first time, I didn't feel like the failed daughter. I felt like the historian he'd trained me to be. "It's a cipher," I said, looking at Richard. "It's based on the Vasari text, the 1000 568 edition. It was a book on the Italian Renaissance. A book he and I had spent an entire summer poring over when I was 16. A book I still knew by heart. This wasn't just a call your lawyer. This was my father reaching out from the grave, speaking to me in a language he knew only I would understand. A language, Cynthia, with all her talk of business and practicality, could never, ever decrypt. He had been preparing for this. He had been preparing me. Richard gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. He had done his part. The rest was up to me. I stood up, gathering my coat, the 5 cards held tightly in my hand. "Where do you think you're going?" Cynthia snapped, her authority faltering. "This meeting is not over." "Yes, it is," I said, looking her dead in the eye. I pulled out my phone. I ignored the 14 missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. I scrolled to a name I hadn't called in years, but a name my father had always called his true north. "I need to call Stephen," I said to Richard. I walked out of that boardroom, leaving Cynthia, her lawyer, and her forged letter sitting in a stunned, cold silence. The first move of the game had been played. Richard followed me into the grand lobby, the click of his dress shoes echoing on the marble. The cold Boston air hit me as the doors slid open, and for the first time in hours, I could breathe. "He knew you'd understand the cards." "Vivian," Richard said, his voice low. "He trusted you completely. He told me, Cynthia sees art as an asset. Vivian sees it as a language. She will be the only one who can read my final statement." I just nodded, my fingers already dialing. The phone rang twice. Then a gruff, wonderfully familiar voice answered. "Stephen." "Stephen," I said, my own voice tight. It's Vivian Sterling." There was a sharp intake of breath. "Vivian. My God. I've been waiting for this call for 2 years. Where are you?" "I'm at the foundation." "She did it. She has a letter. She's trying to have me declared incompetent." "I know," he said, his voice suddenly hard. He predicted every move. "Don't go home. Don't talk to anyone else. My office. Now." Stephen, my father's oldest friend and the most respected art appraiser in New England, arrived not in a sleek town car, but in a beat-up green Volvo. His office was 5 blocks away. A glorious, dusty sanctuary piled high with books, paintings leaning against every wall, the air thick with the smell of turpentine and old paper. He was 70 years old, with kind eyes that had seen everything. And he hugged me so hard, it almost hurt. He was a brilliant man. "Vivian," he whispered, "and he was so proud of you. Now, let's see them." We spread the 5 note cards across his cluttered desk. To anyone else, it was nonsense. A jumble of art history references. To me, it was a map. Page 42. Plate 8B. I murmured, my mind racing. "That's the Vasari text. It's the altarpiece in Florence. The 8th of my birthday. August." "Sfumato's failure," Stephen pointed to the next card. He always called that the forgery he almost bought in 98. I said, the memory flooding back. "Caralo 100. Onitne." That was the lot number. We worked for 20 minutes. My useless Ph.D. unlocking a door my father had built for me. It wasn't a message. It was a set of coordinates. "It's not a password," I said, looking up at Stephen, the pieces clicking into place. "It's a vault number. The First Charter Bank. The private holdings branch on Beacon Hill. The numbers. They're the box number. 81-1921." Stephen let out a slow breath. He walked over to a heavy safe, hidden behind a 17th century tapestry, spun the dial, and opened it. He reached inside and pulled out a single, simple, brass safe, deposit key. He gave this to me 6 months ago, Stephen said, his hand trembling just slightly as he placed it in mine. He said, "When Vivian knows which door it is, give her this." Not a moment sooner. He also handed me a sealed legal document. It was a specific end quote. Limited power of attorney. Notarized 2 years ago. Granting me, Vivian Sterling, sole access to safe deposit box 8119201. Effective only upon his death. The bank manager was cold, sterile, and clearly unimpressed until he saw the notarized document and Stephen's key. I was led into the vault. A silent, refrigerated room that smelled like steel and old money. My heart was hammering. I half expected to find cash, or Yevalry, or some final, sentimental letter. The manager pulled out the long, metal box and placed it on the table. It was almost empty. Inside, there was no money, no gold, no yevels, just 2 items. A thick, black, leather-bound ledger, the kind my father used for his private acquisitions, and a single, matte black, hard drive. I looked at the 2 objects, and the last of my grief was replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. My father wasn't a sentimentalist. He was a strategist. This wasn't a memory. It was a weapon. We didn't speak on the drive back to Stephen's office. The weight of the ledger on my lap felt like a tombstone. The hard drive felt like a bomb. We locked the door. Stephen poured 2 glasses of brandy, his hands shaking slightly. He always did love his theatrics. He muttered, "Which one first?" I asked quietly. "The drive," he said. "The ledger proves it. The drive explains it." He plugged it in. The screen flickered. Then my father appeared. Not the strong man I remembered, but the frail version Cynthia had hidden. Pale. Thin. Yet his eyes still burned. "My dearest Vivian," he began. "If you're watching this, I'm gone, and Cynthia has played her last card." He spoke softly, every word steady. "You must have wondered why I let her push you away. Why I seemed blind. I wasn't blind. Vivian, I was patient." He explained the doctors had given him 2 years. He could have fought publicly, but it would have destroyed everything, including me. So he played the long game, gathering evidence in silence. "I spent my last 2 years building your fortress. The drive is the why. The ledger is the how. Inside the ledger dates, accounts, forged paintings, stolen charity funds. Cynthia had replaced beauty with counterfeits and erased my mother's legacy. She couldn't stand your mother's shadow," he said. "So she erased her. And you?" He leaned closer, but I used her narcissism against her. "I let her exile you. Because distance made you untouchable. She thought she was banishing you. I was preparing you. You're the only expert who can expose her lies." Then, softly, "The trap is set. My love, now make your move." The next day, in the boardroom, Cynthia smiled like a victor until my father's face appeared on the screen. Calmly, he revealed her crimes, her forgeries, her theft, and finally, his will 70% to me, 30% to her only if she never contested it. "If you fight this," he warned in the video, "the FBI gets everything." Cynthia broke. Rage turned to collapse. I looked at her, voice steady. "He gave me his legacy. He gave you a severance package. You weren't his partner. You were his most expensive forgery." She took the money and disappeared. A month later, I stood as director of the Sterling Foundation, watching the real Monet, my mother's favorite rehung. My useless research had been the final piece. My father hadn't abandoned me. He'd armed me. His love wasn't loud. It was strategic, patient, eternal.